Hi, welcome to the Killaby Studio. I'm Maureen Killaby, and today we're going to be doing some fun stuff. I have a secret passion for drawing birds, and I've won a couple of really prestigious awards with birds, and even though I've stopped drawing birds for a little while to get into portraits, I always come back to birds. I love to draw them. And today we're going to draw this really cool bird. Not quite sure what it's called, but I think it's some kind of looks like an ostrich to me. I'll find out the name. So let's take a look at our reference picture. So here's our bird. This is a Demoiselle crane. Cranes are one of my most favorite birds. I absolutely adore them. I have drawn crown cranes. I have drawn sandhill cranes, great blue herons, which are part of the crane genus, red crown cranes. I just absolutely adore them. They're amazing birds. They're so smart. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to draw this cute little Demoiselle crane in polychromos, cool grays, 1 through 6. Well, actually 1 through 5. I can't find 6. Dark indigo blue, Payne's gray, maybe a little black, and some white. So let's get started. So to start this little bird journey, I've actually started using Strathmore colored paper in gray. This comes in a tablet. It's a really nice paper. It takes a lot of abuse and a lot of erasing. And I chose this paper because in the reference picture, you'll notice here the feathers behind the head that come off the eyes are white. So you can't use white paper with a white pencil, so I chose gray. And it adds to the atmosphere or drama of the photo and drawing. So remember, light to dark. So I'm going to start using my cool grays. And I'm going to start with Cool Gray 1. This is a polychromo made by Faber-Castell. These are extremely affordable. And I like to take the stickers off because if you run them through the pencil sharpener, they can gum everything up. So we'll rip those off a little bit later. So this is the Cool Gray 1. We're going to focus with what's going on here in the lightest light. Don't worry, I'm going to come in and put white. And I use a Prismacolor white. I don't use the Faber-Castell white. Never really liked it. It's too hard. These are oil-based colored pencils, and I just never have really liked that polychromo white. So I just use the Prismacolor white. So I'm going to come in with the Cool Gray 1. Kind of use short little strokes, going back and forth, kind of like when I draw hair. Also remember not to draw over the pencil marks with colored pencil, or you'll never get them out. Kind of draw a little directional lines just as a guide. definitely going to mark this spot here. It's no big deal if you leave some open areas because we're going to put a darker gray in there. Just a little side note, if I'm going to use a Prismacolor, which is very waxy, I'm going to put the polychromo down first. Make these little solid areas where there's not a lot of detail. Always keep your little trusty mono 0 around. Just going to mark that with a darker gray. I don't want to go too hard right off the bat. I'm just kind of going where this light gray, not white, kind of pops through in these darker areas. As I'm looking to go to the next color, I started to use Cold Gray 2, and I found that I really didn't need it, so I'm going to eliminate that. It's really not that much darker on the gray paper than the Cold Gray 1. So I'm just going to skip 2 and go right to 3. Right now I want to focus on these areas that are just a little bit darker. So I'm going to go with Cold Gray 3. So we're going to go ahead and go in with Cold Gray 3. Not a huge pressure. And don't go over all of the Cold Gray 1. You want some of that to show through. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that cranes are one of my most favorite birds, and then they really are. But I have actually never seen one of these cranes before, the Demoiselle crane. There are 15 species of these cranes. And I think I only named about 6. So yeah, there's quite a few. So I'm just going to keep drawing these light mid-tone areas. I'm not going to worry about erasing the pencil mark here where it's dark, but I am up at the top. And here on the edge. Just a little. I can still see the line. So this is the Cold Gray 3. I'm going to say my pressure is like a 3 on a scale of 1 to 10. I may go back over this a little bit with the 1 just to soften some of these areas. They look a little hard. Back to the 3. Please pay attention to the direction that the feathers are growing. Super important. Especially in this area, keep your pencil strokes really small, short. I always have to make sure my hand is not in the way, because usually it is. Going back to a 1 real quick, back to a 3. I'm going to mark a spot with a cold gray 4 real quick. And then go back to my 3. I'm going to introduce to you another little tool that I've never used, well, that I've never recorded me using, is a slice tool. And this is a little razor. It's called Slice. It's a ceramic razor. I think I'm going to get another one. Same manufacturer. These are tiny little razors that are ceramic in material. They're great for pulling out tiny little hairs. I'm not going to use it yet, but it would be used to pull out little bits of fine hair. There's really not enough of the colored pencil on the paper to warrant using this yet, and you can't really see it when you're using a light value, so we're going to wait until we get into some of the darkest values. So this is kind of a cool little tool, and I'll show you how tiny this little blade is. It's pretty small. So we're going to have fun playing with that. But let's just keep drawing with cold gray 3, and then we're going to move to cold gray 4. Now we're going to play around with some Payne's Gray. Since putting in the Payne's Gray, obviously it's a much darker color, and it's also more blue than the regular cold grays. I really like the dark indigo as well, but I'm going to be really careful with that color. If I'm going to use dark indigo to put a little value of blue in there, I'm going to skim that in carefully. Cranes, herons, any bird that has a gray feather in it, especially these birds and the crown cranes, they have a blue tone to their feathers, a blue-gray. Now if it gets to be too blue, Go over it with a cold gray 5. Don't worry about it getting too dark. I'm just skimming the paper. Go back to Payne's Gray. I've already put all the whites in, and we're going to talk about white. Keep your pencils sharp. I'm going to lighten my hand pressure and just skim over this real soft area above the eye. And then you'll see it gets darker again. Then I'm going to lighten up my pressure again so that it's nice and gradient into this light area. If it gets too dark, you can always go over it with a little bit of white. Which causes it to turn blue, so that's actually an added bonus. And creates more texture. How cool is that? This is Payne's Gray again. I'm constantly going back and forth, back and forth. Dark light, dark light. Now if you want a little spot that you want darker and it won't, or excuse me, lighter, and it won't go any lighter, take a darker pencil and come in around it. That'll make that spot lighter. What happens when it's not dark enough? Well, one, you can push harder. Two, you can go to a darker pencil. But be careful with darker pencils. I use black, but I'm really careful with it. Okay, well that's getting the results that I want. So I'm getting good texture, good realism, and I'm going to continue on with the Payne's Gray. So while I'm continuing on with the Payne's Gray, I'm kind of switching back and forth between Payne's Gray, white, and a little tiny bit of dark indigo. A little bit of this is just a bit too blue, So I'm going to cover it with Cold Gray 5. I mean, I don't mind it that much, but it's just too much for my taste. So I'm just gonna cover that with Cold Gray 5 because it doesn't have any blue in it. In this next segment, we're going to talk about different whites. Okay, let's talk about whites. There are so many different whites out there. I have already expressed my dislike for the Faber-Castell Polychromo white. I mean, it's okay, but it's literally just too hard for me. It's a hard pencil. So, being, great whites and awesome blacks and things like that, I normally keep going back to Prismacolor, but I did discover a new white that I really like, and this is Stabilo white. Now this is a water soluble white, and I gotta say it goes over pretty much anything. Prismacolor being waxy is nice. It's very pure. And when I came over here, I added, let me see if I can zoom in just a tad bit. With this gray paper, I want white coverage. So I came in and just filled that in with Prismacolor white. But when I used the Stabilo, it didn't quite cover it the way that the Prisma does. I felt like there were some white spots, but you can go over the Prisma with the Stabilo and it works wonderful to get a pure white. So both of these pencils work really well, even together. There's also Derwent Drawing Chinese white, and that worked really well. I'm not very familiar with the Derwent pencils except for the Light Fast, but these seem to cover pretty well too. So all in all, I like all three. Pretty much the same. And they work nicely together. So I'm assuming that they're all wax based. Now, I know that students hate it when I spring on a new pencil in the middle of a project, but I'm going to do it anyway. And this is something because it's something that you don't have to do. But I like the Verithin made by Prismacolor white. It is a non-waxy, very hard pencil, but boy, it can get some fine lines, and that's why I like it. So I'm going to be drawing these fine lines here on the end. I'm going to show you exactly where I'm going to put the Verithin. So right in here, there you have these really fine lines. And it's okay that this is not going to be the purest pure white, because as you can see, the background, which is green, is going to sort of lower this value compared to that value. So it's okay. You can use a Prismacolor really, really sharp. You can use a Stabilo really, really sharp. Any white pencil that you feel comfortable with that's going to be really, really sharp and pointed, so you'd have to sharpen it quite a lot. Another really cool thing, and I don't have it here, but I may later on in this video, is a white ink pencil pen. I don't know that it would get these thin lines, because these can be super thin. And I like that. That's really cool. You can hear my cat in the background. I think she found a bird. Lucy. Yeah, she found a bird or a squirrel. She likes to sit in here while I'm drawing. So for this area, we're going to use, we will pull back out the Cool Gray 2. We're going to be using the 1 and the 2 in here. And probably after we put this area in first, we'll put this in second. These little flyaways. Because I want them to go over the gray to make this grayer, a light gray. So that's my little short quickie lesson on whites. So find whatever white works for you and experiment, have fun. There's no rules. Well, except for if you're going to enter CPSA shows, I would hesitate using mixed media like ink. Stick to just colored pencil because they have a rule about that. So I'm going to continue on with my Payne's Gray and switch back and forth between Payne's Gray, Cool Gray 5, right in here. This is a Cold Gray 5. Now I'm going to switch to a Cold Gray 4. I'm just checking to see the value. And I like it better, so I'm going to stick with the 4. Sorry about that, but I'm gonna make my hand comfortable just for a minute. That might be too much of an angle. There. It's pretty light over here in this section, so I'm going to put down the cold gray one real quick. Just a little. And put that away because I'm pretty much done with that for a while, at least in this section. Going back to my 4. Going back to a 5. Going to slow down and make smaller strokes. Sometimes I get a little bit ahead of myself, so I've got to slow down. Also, it's good to slow down, rest your hand. If you want to create some deeper dimension in the feathers, you can take a black polychromo or a black Verithin and just lightly put in some thin little deep feathers. Not sure if you can actually see that. So we can zoom in. Hopefully it will focus. And it does, so that's awesome. I have a heavy hand. I guess I'll resharpen that real quick. I really am not a big fan of these handheld sharpeners, but I like the hand crank, but I left that one at the studio, so I'm left with that. These Verithins can be hard, so if you want to use a polychromo, it's perfectly fine because that one broke. So I'm going to grab my, I don't even think I have a polychromo. Oh, I do. I'm going to use a black Stabilo. That's not on the list and it doesn't have to be used. But look how creamy and how smooth that goes on. It's pretty effortless actually. Now if you get too much, just take a cool gray 4 and go over that. That'll push that back a little. Or a 1. That'll actually pull out some highlights. You can even use your white Stabilo or a white Prisma. These are great little pencils. I will go ahead and list these as well on the supplies so that you have the name. Kind of crumbly, but they're good. These are brilliant little pencils. So now I'm going to go back to my Payne's Gray down here. Start working these chunky areas. I'm going to mark this little shadow here. I think people tend to forget that colored pencil is a lot of layering. Let's move the camera back out and just get to drawing. All right, before we move any further, I want to get this shadow down here so I don't want to have to put my hand over this. So I'll be using a Cool Gray 1 and 2. So I'm basically just going to fill this in. Switch to a 2. Which to me is kind of useless because it's really not that dark. Then I'm going to go to a 3. Start changing my angle and do some hatching and cross hatching. And just fill in where it's got no detail. We'll come in and put detail in and just after we're done. And this is not getting the value that I want, so probably switch to a 4. I mean, putting 3 in is fine. It's just one little area that's pretty dark. I'm going to lighten my pressure. Just be really careful about how dark I'm going to go. If you feel like you're getting too dark, you can always go back over it with a lighter color. But if you're starting to push a little harder and just pulling off what's underneath, go to a darker pencil. It's going to be much lighter as you go upward. I'm just going to put in a little bit of negative drawing here really quickly. To get these more dense areas, I'm just going to go ahead and use my Prisma. See if I can really pop that spine and that feather. Should mark all the spines anyway, because this can get a little crazy in here. I'm going to show you what I mean. Cool gray 4. Do some hatching and cross hatching. What happens is it actually gives that little feather a shadow. I'm not pushing very hard, but these are like crossover. Now the ones out here, I'm going to fill in the bulk of it. And then I'm going to take the white Verithin. Oops, sorry, I need to erase that pencil real quick. I'm going to zoom over on that side. Go back to my Verithin here in just 1 second. It's safe to remove all that pencil mark. Kind of like drawing fine hairs. And there you go. I'm going to keep on working in this gray area. I'm going to take a Payne's gray and pop in those little hairs coming off. Oops, let's erase this. Actually, I think I need to wait to get this dark area in, but I can do a few. You can also use a black Verithin if you want those fine hairs. Those work really well. So I'm going to continue working in here. These would probably show up a lot better but if I had a background, but I chose not to since I'm using the gray paper. Oh, speaking of gray paper, I also want to recommend one of my other favorite colored papers is Canson Colorline. I love that paper. It's so easy to use, so many colors, and like this, it's extremely durable. So I'm just going to keep on going. I'm going to start the neck using Payne's Gray, Black, Cold Gray 5. Actually, I'm going to try dark indigo as well. Because this black Stabilo is really dark. If you have a Polychromo Cool Gray 6, that would probably work best, but I do not have one right at the moment. Yeah, no black. Payne's Gray, Cool Gray 5. This is the Payne's Gray, so I think that'll work best. I just put a little spot in his eye just so I can check the value next to the face. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut that off at the bottom, but there's not a whole lot going on down there. So I finished with the Payne's Gray. Now these birds are typically very black in the face in these dark areas. There's a little tinge of blue depending on whether the sunshine hits them. And so now that I've got Payne's Gray in there, I am going to go take my Polychromo Black and start adding, because the Payne's Gray is a lighter dark pencil, if that makes any sense. In some of the pictures that I've seen, because when I'm doing a bird, I like to get different reference pictures. I noticed that there's more black in the neck towards the top, and sometimes when the sun hits it, it turns kind of bluish. So what I'm going to do, since this Payne's Gray is lighter than the black, I'm going to start putting in these little puffy areas. Just a tiny bit right in here. Then I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to flatten it a little. I'm just going to go over it with black, make it dark. This is like a tufted area right here, and then it's slicker down here at the bottom. Their necks are not as long as the crown cranes. Well, they might be, and I know the herons got super long necks. They're part of the crane genus. So I just basically want to darken the Payne's Gray. So I'm just kind of skimming over, making the neck darker. And praying that I don't screw this up. Going to start working around these inner feathers here. These ones. They're not totally white, even though your brain tells you that they are. They're just gray. So I'm still working on the black. These neck feathers lay down nicely, nice and neat. Unlike these ones up here that are more ruffled, and I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with those to give it a fluffy look. Okay, now I'm going to take a Polychromo Cold Gray 3. I'm not sure if you can see this or not. Maybe I can zoom in a little. See these little fluffy little feathers that are just above the color or value of black? I'm going to softly put those in. And that is working out beautifully. So I'm super excited about this. And I can't wait to get to the eye, which is next after these feathers. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and start putting in these white feathers. I'm gonna back the camera up just a tad. And I'm going to measure the length, and they should come all the way out. This is the white Stabilo, by the way. And it is dusty. Now on the shadow side, well, this is going to be a little difficult. I'm going to put that in and then fill that in with I don't want to put black in there. These are super soft pencils, like really soft. You can smash them and they will. It's like butter. Might need a darker pencil. I'm just going to go ahead and fill that in with Cold Gray 5. Because it's not quite black. And the white over the black makes it look gray. So that looks better. It helps to draw the spine first. You can come in with a black pencil and touch some of that up. Make sure it's sharp. So if you hear this noise, you know I'm sharpening. You can lightly go over or in and separate. Kind of like negative drawing. It's kind of cool. And go back over it with weight. That needs to be tighter. Even if they don't turn out perfectly white, it's okay. Because people get the idea that it's a feather and it's beautiful. Don't forget to hatch and cross hatch. That creates the bulky parts. And if it becomes too bulky, just come in with your really sharp black and thin those little tiny hairs out. How cool is that? Fun! Same thing with the lighter areas. You can come in with gray. And it blends perfectly. As far as these shadows up in here, I just went over it with gray. It looks almost turquoise, and if you have a turquoise pencil, you can definitely do that. Actually, I have a small turquoise pencil. You can give it a tiny little bluish tone if you want to. This is totally optional and last minute. Make sure it's more gray than it is blue. And I'm going to separate a couple of things with my Cold Gray 5. And then earlier we talked about the slice tool. I'm not sure if this is actually dark enough to achieve any kind of super thin, but we can try. I think that got just a little too dark, so we're going to lighten that up. There, I think I'm going to leave that alone. So we definitely need to give that there. I think I achieved what I wanted to. Okay, as far as the slice tool, we're going to have to zoom in, and I'll show you how this works. There are some pretty thin little feathers, little fine feathers right up in here. Hopefully you can see that. And all I do is just basically scrape these little fine hairs. It works better when it's in a dark section. Yep. If you really want minute detail, use the side of it, not this way. You'll cut your paper. It won't work in the white, and let me show you. Can't see anything. So no need to ruin your paper. This is a handy little tool. It's very cool. It's great for getting the finest hairs. This works really good with drafting film. Oh, hope I'm not getting too far off. Especially up in that little area here, there's quite a few. But like I said, it has to be dark in order for them to show up. Yeah, kind of fun to play with. Okay, now we're going to do the eyeball, my favorite part. Okay, eyeball, my favorite. If you sketch this out correctly, you should see all the little lines. And I'm going to be using black, very sharp, cold gray 3, very sharp, and cold gray 2. So I've already indicated the dark area here. Now I'm going to put in, boy, that is super light. This little fine gray area. And I'm going to come back to black. And that should make the gray area show up. I'm hoping you can see that. I could get a little closer if it stays in focus. Yeah, good. And probably Payne's Gray, because I see a little bluish. So let me sharpen the Payne's Gray real quick. I'm going to use the Payne's Gray right on the edge of the gray between the gray and the black. It's almost like there's little eyelashes. They're super cute. And it gets pretty thin in there. And that gray part actually disappears. Back to my Payne's Gray. And to make it bluish, I can take a little bit of white and skim over that. Now I'm going to go to my black. Some of that part of the head I didn't finish, so I really need to do that. know, some of this I didn't actually finish. So one thing I definitely need to do is need to back this off just a tad bit and push that gray back. There. Finish those feathers coming up over the eyelid. I'm constantly sharpening my pencils. And it starts again. Not quite sure why I put that there. That's weird. So let's take that out. There. And there goes my erasers. Okay, recovered. Yeah, that's odd. Okay, so below that, we're still kind of, it gets really thin right in there because the eye pops out over. That might be too much, but I think it's okay. So now I'm gonna do a little Payne's gray at the bottom, and then we're gonna put some white in there. There's a shadow there that comes down, and we're going to make sure that's really solid. Well, I tell you, when you start shading, you can really see where your values are off. So right now I'm using Payne's Gray, Black, White Stabilo, Cold Gray 3, and Cold Gray 2. Okay, that's the outline. Now, you probably saw me filling this in earlier. I usually go right straight in for the pupil. Straight black. Wide-eyed bird. Okay. Next, the two yellows are Sanguine and Dark Chrome Yellow. So I'm going to start with the dark chrome yellow. Really needs to be sharper. Make sure I erase this. Little at a time. Not quite sure why that's so far down. Because that highlight is actually right there, up by the eyelid. Sometimes that black pulls in, so be careful. Those lines can be hard to erase. I'm just going to erase that out again. Yep, caught another little black piece in there. Boy, those can be annoying. Just barely getting there next to the black, because I really don't want to catch any more of that. Probably should have done the eye first and then the black. Okay, there's a little bit of a halo right here. And down here. It's probably what that white part was all about. Okay, now I'm going to come in with the sanguine. Actually, we're going to go lightly. Yeah, that's pretty orange. Oh, I think I just went over my highlight. That's why it felt weird. Nice save. Okay, next color is going to be nougat. I like nougat because it's a neutral brown. Probably should sharpen that. It kind of calms that orange down. Makes it like a warm orange shadow. I actually think that this needs to come down. So we're going to fix that. This needs to come down. And Payne's Gray. Too high. Still needs to come down. Well, that's where white ink comes in. It's so funny, but sometimes I'll spend more time on the eyes than anything else. Now I'm going to go back to the sanguine. Because this little eyeball looks kind of fake. So we're going to add some dimension to it. Trying not to touch that black. These birds have red eyes. Not the right shape. There. That's a little more calm. Now we need a darker red, which I don't have on the list. Like a rust color. No, that's too red. Maybe we can come up with something, but I'm going to stick with the colors I've got. There's a lot of tweaking. And I just put that black in and I have to take it right back out. Sometimes I do stuff like that. I don't know why. I'm going to create a little, oh boy, there's some black on that white pencil. Create some glossy. Okay, so that, we're going to create a few little eyelashes. I don't know how that's going to work. Not. It should be gray, but I don't think I can get gray in there. And then a little shadow. Of the eyelashes. Over the eye. Super cute. And I'll fiddle with it a little more until it's just the way I want it. But for the most part, I think it's pretty good. I'm sure I'll fuss with it some more. But next we're going to do the beak. I'm just going to mess with the values a little. He is just super cute. Nope, there went another pencil. That's okay. So we're going to use a different one. When you draw these birds, you're going to know why you love them. You're going to find out that you love them because they're awesome. On to the beak. Now that we're down to the last few bits of this Demoiselle crane, we're going to do the beak. Fairly simple. Up here, I'm going to use a little bit of Cold Gray 1 and white. It doesn't really matter which white. You can use the Stabilo, or you can use... Actually, I kind of like the Prismacolor because it's the whitest white. And we'll just start up here. We'll use a little bit of Cold Gray 3 in these little bits. Especially along the edges here. And as we get down towards this peachy area, we're going to use light flesh. Kind of marry the two sections together. And hopefully, well, that actually just went a little bit too far up, so we'll take some of that off. And let's give this a good sharpen. You can lay in the little bits of gray, and I'll show you here just one second. There's little bits of gray, as you can see, in and around here. So you can go ahead and put those in. That's totally fine. And I just happened to grab my Cold Gray 5 ever so lightly. Get in around the edges of that nose hole, beak hole, whatever you want to call that. And right in here. This actually goes from really dark to a gray. I'm going to stop about right there. Get some of this edge work done and hopefully bring that on down. Like I said earlier in the video, I think I really like putting in the polychroma down first. Now I'm going to go ahead and continue with the white Prisma. These birds have really scratchy beaks due to them rubbing it on wood, rock. I think the beaks are the coolest part for me. I like the texture. Now down here there's a bit of a ivory. So I'm going to grab my well, actually, looking at this, there's just a tiny little bit of gray where that shadow is there, and a little here. Just going to grab an ivory. I don't care if it's cream or this is a Faber-Castell ivory. It's probably what the color of the beak actually is. Don't think that it's pure white. So I might mix some of that ivory in with the white. I'm going to throw some gray back into that little shadow above, right here. And really finish that off with the white. And the ivory. I'm always dropping pencils. I'm going to go back to my flesh, light flesh. Then I'm going to take my cinnamon pop the tip a little, and then we're going to put that shadow in underneath. It actually looks more gray. So I'm going to use a little bit of gray in here. This is a cold gray 5, just to really get that shadow in there. I'm going to sharpen this real quick. Go back over it with the cinnamon. I'm going to tone that down a little bit. I did find my cold gray 6. I have 1. So, we don't need to be all crazy fancy with that too much. Just want to tighten this up a little. There's one other thing that I did want to try. I was going to put a little Venetian red in there, but I don't think it really makes a difference. The other thing that I wanted to try was white ink. I think I had talked about it earlier. It's to get those kind of craggy. This is something that is totally optional. This is just called a jelly roll. Kind of gets all this little scratches and whatnot in their beaks, if you can get it to work. I tend to have to go slow. Just adds a little extra texture. Really fun to play around with this. Next up, we'll do the other side of the feathers. Gonna give it a last little white area. I would call that the beak done. Just gonna start working the right side of the feathers with a cold gray one. Well, first I drew with the very thin white or Prismacolor white. I don't really care which one. I just drew in the spines. That helps quite a lot. Then I take the cold gray one and draw in the little feathers, crisscrossing, cross-hatching. Shouldn't be too terribly hard. Let me see if I can get a better view on that. I can't really see it because of the gray paper. Kind of missing a little spine here. Obviously you can't get all of those little teeny tiny feathers, so you just do the best you can. Keep your pencil sharp. I'm going to move the camera over just a little so you can see a little bit better. We'll zoom in on it in just a moment. Now if you want some of that to show up a little bit better, you can go with your cold gray 3, or no, this is a 4, sorry, and separate some of those out if you wanted to. It actually works really well. I just don't do it too much. Going back to my cold gray one. just wanted to back up a little bit and take a look. Add a little bit of blue back there. Kind of makes them glow. Just a little bit. Kind of pushes that shadow. I was going to use turquoise, but I'm not sure if I like the turquoise. Looks very good over here. Now you don't have to use turquoise, that's totally optional. I'll give it a little bit of turquoise. Like I said, I don't really know that it needs it. But what the heck, have fun with it. Well, I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial and this cute little bird, Demoiselle crane. Feel free to hunt down bird photos on Pixabay and any other free website pictures. Hey, I just wanted to say thanks for joining me. This little bird was quite a lot of fun, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Drawing birds is a little bit of a passion for me. So, once again, thanks, and hope to see you soon.